Hello, and welcome back to the Lost Caverns of Ixalan set review. I'm doing red cards today, and red is often very good in limited. Basically hasn't been a below the second best color in like a year, so we're riding that high, baby. And today, we're going to talk about the red cards. Specifically in limited, I don't know anything about constructed because I don't play it, and that's the joke. So without further ado, let's talk about how I grade the cards. There's 5 tiers that I use to talk about cards. Tier 1 is the best, and Tier 5 is the worst, similar to other grading scales that exist. I don't like those. I feel that they're too granular. It's fine. I'm not gonna go on a treatise about why I use the system. This is just the system I like and the system I use. So we're sticking with it. And without further ado, let's just get right into the cards. You've just seen this card. It's a braid. I think it's a tier 1 card. I think it's the perfect environment for a braid. You really couldn't ask for a better spell in this type of set. Deal 3, remove an artifact, tons of artifacts. The card just going to be an absolute beating every time your opponent casts it, so nothing more to say about a braid. It's just an absolute house. Ancestor's Aid. One in a red for an instant. Target creature gets +2/+1 against first strike until end of turn to create a treasure token. So, normally this type of trick isn't amazing, but creating a treasure token is really good. Like, it's really a strong thing to be doing. I think we've seen this exact card before in, I think it was Strixhaven. And it was probably a little worse than this. It was probably a tier 4 card in that set. I think there's more to do with the treasure in this set, so I'm giving it a little bit of a boost. Usually this type of card's not very good, but I do really like essentially you're making this 1 mana for 2/1 first strike, or +2/+0 first strike, which is pretty good. Like, it's not bad. And again, there is more to do with treasures in this set. They do allow you to cast, like, there's not going to be a ton of splash stuff going on, but I kind of don't hate this card. I put it in tier 3 for now. I could totally see this is good. This is not a card that I'm going to take like it's in tier 3, but I'm just kind of like predicting that by the end of the format, this is how I'm going to feel about it. But I'm not like starting there. You know what I mean? It's kind of a weird situation. Like, this is not a card I'll be taking like it's a tier 3 card early, just because like you don't need to. People are always going to think this card's bad, whether or not it is. It may end up just being bad. Highly possible. Belligerent Yearling. 1 and a red for a 3/2 trample. When another dinosaur enters the battlefield under your control, you may have this creature's base power become equal to that creature's power until end of turn. Yeah, this card's just an absolute house. 2 mana 3/2 trample is like almost a tier 1 card by itself. Like, that is just like really good. That's a really good 2-drop. And 2-drops, of course, are the kings of limited. They're the most important cards in limited. So, and sometimes this one becomes larger. It doesn't really need to ever. Like, if this literally was just a 2 mana 3/2 trample and it was a dinosaur and had types, I think it would be totally fine. But the fact that it gets extra value just is excellent. Just truly excellent. And plays very well with like everything in the whole set. Even though, again, I'm not a huge believer in dinosaur stuff, but I think this card is just going to go in every deck, so not worried about it. Bone Horde Dracosaur. 3 red for a 5/5 flying first strike. At the beginning of your upkeep, exile the top 2 cards of your library. You may play them this turn. If you exile the land card this way, create a 3/1 dinosaur token. If you exile the non-land card this way, create a treasure token. I don't know, this card's just busted. Like, yes, I understand it has to survive for a turn, but it's a 5 mana 5/5 flying first strike. Like, come on, man. Like, that's just pretty absurd. Like, truly absurd, honestly. It's a large dragon. It's Dragon D's and whatnot. That's the joke. The joke is that it's just very good. So, you know. Yep. Brass's Tunnel Grinder. Okay, wait a minute. We're about to deep dive on this. Why did they use the extra S? Because I think you can just use the apostrophe there. I don't think you need the S. I don't know. Might be for like a non-English. Like, honestly, the reason to use the extra S is for like the. There might actually be like an actual like grammatical reason, and I'm just wrong. But I always thought that like you don't need it if the last letter's an S. The reason might just be for like, hey, it's easier to translate for people that don't like speak English natively. So that would be the reason I would do it on Magic cards. So if that's the reasoning, I'm pretty for it. Anyways, 2 and a red for a legendary artifact. When it enters the battlefield, discard any number of cards, then draw that many cards plus 1. At the beginning of your end step, if you descended this turn, put a boar counter on this thing, and then if there are 3 or more boar counters on it, you transform it into this land, and it has taps for red mana. And you can, whenever you cast a permanent spell using mana produced by this land, you discover X, where X is that spell's mana value. So the land is cracked, obviously. The problem I have with this card is that the front side is awful, like truly awful bad. You obviously are going to discard at least 1 card because you would rather have, you want to descend, so you're going to discard something that descends because otherwise you're just not doing anything. If you can flip it, it's really good. You have to descend every turn, though, and your opponent knows that you're doing it, and they can just remove this artifact, and you're not impacting the board for 3 mana. So those are the concerns. Like, those are the concerns with this card is, hey, 3 mana, like, not impacting the board, needs 3 turns of descending to actually do something. And then you still have to have a spell you want to cast, and the spell has to be kind of big, because you want to be able to discover for something you want to be able to discover for, like, 3 or more. If you're discovering for 2, like, sure, you'll find a 2-drop, it'll be in the battlefield, that's fine. But is that getting you back in the game? Probably not. So, and Discover, the thing about Discover is that it misses, you know what I mean? Like, it does sometimes just say, oh, well, you drew a card, and that's good, but certainly not, the tempo plays that you kind of need to be making to, like, get back from this. I think this is actually Tier 3. I think Tier 4 is probably a bit too harsh. Definitely a cool card. Definitely wins the coolness. I just am really down on this type of effect where it's like, you have to, like, wait around for it to, like, do something, and then, like, you have to descend, and, like, if you, like, your opponent can just not trade off, and then they can just, like, they can kill, your stuff on their turn, and then you can't do it anymore. So, like, you do have to kind of enable this. So I'm not super excited about it. I will pick it highly, though, because it's rare. That's why, because of rarity. Because Anyways. Brazen Blade Master, 2 and a red for 2/3. When it attacks while you control 2 or more artifacts, it gets +2/+1 until end of turn. Yeah, I don't like this card very much. The reason I don't like it is that it has to attack to get those stats, and a 3-mana 2/3 on blocks is awful, terrible, horrible, not playable. We just saw that this is not very good. The first striker in white from the last set, it was a 2/3 for 3 that could gain double strike when you whatever did stuff. I think this is actually better than that card, just straight up. But that card was really bad. It actually had, like, the worst stats among top players as for, like, white uncommons or whatever. It was horrible. So it really didn't get there. And this, I think, is better, but not meaningfully better, so I'm not super interested in it. I think if you enable it, it's probably, like, if you're all in, the problem is it is not an artifact, so it doesn't enable your other artifact stuff, which, it's kind of, those type of cards tend to kind of not be very great. Breach's Eager Pillager, 2 and a red for a 3/3 first strike. Whenever a pirate you control attacks, choose one that hasn't been chosen this turn, create a treasure token, target creature can't block this turn, exile top card to library, you may play it this turn. Very good card, very, very good. Base rate's just insane. The abilities, like, there are enough 2-drop pirates in this set, especially in, like, blue-red, that this card in blue-red is just, like, if you play this on 3 and you have a pirate on the battlefield, you basically just win instantly. Like, you don't, but you get either a free attack likely, or you get a treasure token. Like, that just seems so good. It's just so good. It's just so good. And, like, sometimes it attacks. Like, I don't know. It's just really, really good. It's just a really strong card. Tier 1. Burning Sun Cavalry, 1 and a red for a 2/2. When it attacks or blocks while you control a dinosaur, it gets +1/+1 until end of turn. Again, it is not a dinosaur itself, and so therefore I don't believe in it. The dinosaur deck really, really wants dinosaurs. Like, it really wants its creatures to be dinosaurs. Like, I understand it's a 2-drop for that deck, but, like, no. Like, no other deck is going to want it. Like, 2-mana 2/2, no text is not a great card. And there are some common and uncommon dinosaurs, and they are somewhat playable. But I just don't think it's going to be, like, in red-green, which is the deck that this is supposed to be in, I think this is going to be, like, maybe a Tier 3 card, and every other deck it's on Tier 5, so I put it in Tier 4. Calamitus Cave in, 3 and a red for a sorcery. It deals X damage to each creature and each planeswalker, where X is the number of caves you control plus the number of caves in your graveyard. I am not a cave believer, so the caves deck, I'm gonna have to see it to believe it, and I have yet to see it because I can't see the future. So I'm just off it for now. Child of the Volcano, 3 and a red for a 3/3 trample. At the beginning of your end step, if you descended this turn, put a +1/+1 counter on it. I don't know. Tier 5 is probably a little low, but again, this type of card is always bad. It's always much worse than you think because it's a 4 mana 3/3. You know, it's better than some versions of this. Like, okay, how good is a 4 mana 4/4 trample vanilla? It's like a tier 3 card. It's not even that good. In red, it's probably a little bit like it's probably tier 3 in red, and in every other color, it's like, yeah, I don't know, it's fine. So if this was just that all the time, it would probably be okay. But it's not that. Some of the time. Sometimes you're just going to play this on 4, and your opponent's going to be like, I abrade it. And then you lose, because you spent 4 mana on a 3/3, and I just hate 4 mana 3/3s. So, 4 mana 3/3s basically all start out in tier 5, and if like I see something incredible from them, then they move up. But I start them at tier 5, because 4-drops are just not that much of a priority. Oh look, it's another 4 mana 3/3. Curator of Sun's Creation. 3 in a red for a 3/3. When you discover again for the same value. The ability triggers only once each turn. This card is definitely worse than the previous card. Make no mistake about it, it is definitely worse than the previous card. They are both in tier 5. It does not matter. They are both awful. This one is much worse because it doesn't even like have any chance of being somewhat reasonable. But what if you discover again for the same value? Okay, but like, yes, the effect is powerful, but it is on a 4 mana 3/3, and they just die to every single piece of removal in the game. They die to literally everything, and you have to untap, and it just doesn't like. And then you have to like, even if you untap, it's like, well, I had to have the discover card in my hand, and the discover value had to be high enough to make up for the fact that this creature isn't doing anything on board, and I didn't have any good blocks. Yeah, I don't think this is very good. At least it doesn't have to attack. At least it doesn't have to attack to have the effect. But yeah, no. Daring Discovery. 4 and a red for a sorcery. Up to 3 target creatures can't block this current. Discover 4. I kind of like this card. I had it a little higher originally, and then I was like, ooh, it's 5 mana. 5. And then I thought about it a little more, and I was like, ooh, 5 mana. 5 mana is a high amount of mana. I don't want to be paying 5 mana for things. I don't want to be paying 5 mana for my 4 mana things. There will be some times that this card is very good, and there will be some times, and this is just true of all Discover / Cascade stuff. And there will be times that it's very bad. And so, I don't know. I'm rating this low to start. I don't put a premium on 5 mana cards, so you probably pick one of these up late, and I'll try it out. And it might be good. It does kind of give Hazardous Blast vibes, because you get to attack for like 5, and then also get to play like a thing that defends you. So I do think that it's probably pretty good, and you probably want like, there is again diminishing returns do exist on this, although there's fewer than usual because of the Discover 4 does help you like make up for some of that tempo loss. But yeah, sometimes the Discover 4 just goes to your hand, and then you're sad and you don't have a creature in play. So yeah, it is concerning. Diamond Pickaxe. Single red mana for an artifact that is indestructible. It is equipment. Equipped creature gets +1/+1 and has, whenever this creature attacks, create a treasure token and equip for 2. So, pretty good card. Generally, this type of card is good. The like, make an artifact, like make a treasure when you attack. Now, obviously, equip 2. Much worse. Like, this is worse than Gold Vein Pick again. Like, Gold Vein Pick is kind of the gold standard for this, where it's play 2 to play the equipment, 1 to equip. This is not that, because it's 2 to equip, but 1 to play the equipment. So it is a little worse, but I still think that the effect is pretty good, and we'll see some home. And again, just making treasure tokens and like repeated artifact generation, I think, is going to matter, and this will help you do that. Dynamaton. 3 and a red for a 4/3 menace. When Dynamaton enters the battlefield, target creature you control gains menace until end of turn. It is a dinosaur. It is also a gnome. Shadow gnomes. I don't know why this is. Wait, how is this a gnome? Interesting. Again, I don't really read types very often because usually they don't matter. But dinosaur tribal is a thing in this set. Yeah, I mean, this is a good card, obviously. Strong card. Enables an attack. Basically, like when this comes into play, you play it on 4, your 3-drop attacks, it has Menace, it gets in for some damage. Then you have another thing with Menace. It's nice. It's a nice little effect. Nothing super, it's just kind of glue, whatever, fits in all your decks. It's an artifact, it's a dinosaur. Again, it's a 4-drop. 4-drops are, you don't want, 8 4-drops in your deck. You probably only want like 6 max, so there is some tension with like, hey, you don't really want to pick this very early. So that is certainly a thing to keep in mind with this type of card. Dire Flail, single red mana for an equipment. Equip creature gets +2/+0, equip 1. So that's good. This is a good card. And you can craft with artifact for 3 red, and it transforms into another equipment. And the equipped creature now gets +3/+0 and has whenever this creature attacks, you may sacrifice an artifact other than this equipment. When you do, this creature deals damage equal to its power to target creature, and it is equipped for 1. So transforms into a better equipment that can like sacrifice more stuff. I don't think you're going to be transforming this very often, but the base equipment is very good, and you can use it to craft with stuff if you want. Seems really solid to me. Like 1 mana, equip +2/+0, Bone Splitter, good card and limited. It's not, we saw Eater of Virtue, and Eater of Virtue wasn't great or anything, but in an artifact-based set, I think this gets a lot better. So that's my view on it. Dousing Device, 1 in a red for an artifact. Again, looks like an equipment. This is the second non-equipment equipment that we've seen this set. Kind of a little bit mad about it. Whenever it or another artifact enters the battlefield under your control, up to 1 target creature you control gets +1/+0 and gains haste until end of turn. Then you transform this into, if you control 4 or more artifacts. It transforms into a land. The land has 2 in a red for and tap. It can also add red mana. And then until end of turn, target creature gets haste and +X/+0X is the number of artifacts you control. Actually, only it's a sorcery. I'm not super interested in this card. The thing about this card is it needs too much help. Like, you just need so much help to get it going. And yes, it gives your stuff haste, but like cards like this, there's also a green one that's similar to this card where it's, you have to play it, and then it's like, well, if my opponent has like any way to interact with my stuff, it doesn't do anything, and I didn't play a 2-drop on 2. Like, and I guess it's not that you didn't play a 2-drop on 2, it's that you had fewer options on turn, like you had fewer options earlier in the game, which is actually a real cost. Like, playing this type of card in your deck is a real cost because you want to play it early, but playing it on turn 2 is bad because you're not playing a 2-drop. So it's got that kind of like tension that I don't like in cards like this. And the land is not very good, so it doesn't really, like, it's fine, but it's not doing anything special. So I'm pretty down on this card. Dreadmaw's Ire. Single red mana for an instant. Until end of turn, target attacking creature gets +2/+2 and gains trample, and whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, destroy target artifact that player controls. Yeah, this is really, really good. This card's just super busted. Most of the time when you're using a combat trick, you want it to be on something that is attacking. The restriction does make this worse considerably than if you could just cast it on non-attacking creatures, but I don't think it matters that much, because again, 90%, like, yes, you can't use it to save your creature, but if you're doing that, you're in a pretty bad spot. It does lose some flexibility, but it gains the ability to destroy artifacts, and you can sometimes just say, hey, I'm going to use this as a 1-mana deal 2 to my opponent, destroy an artifact, and that's really good. That's a really good card. So, obviously, again, it does get blown out sometimes. Combat tricks do get blown out sometimes, but, like, that's, if you're a good player, you know how to not have that happen to you as much. Enterprising Scallywag. 1 in a red for a 2/2 at the beginning of your end step. If you descend to this turn, create a treasure token. So I really like this card, and the reason I like it a lot is that it makes treasure tokens. And making treasure tokens is very good. So that's the thesis on this one. I originally had this a bit lower because it is a 2-mana 2/2, but then I was like, wait, it's a 2-drop that you can play, and it's not that bad, and it's a pirate, which actually does, like, there are some types that, like, pirate does actually matter for some cards, especially blue cards. Again, blue-red is kind of a piratey artifact deck, so, like, this does kind of, like, there's some cards that you're going to want, like, this, it's going to show up, and you're like, the type's actually kind of nice. again, making treasures is just really good. I'm really high on stuff that makes treasures, and this one makes repeated treasures. So yeah. Itali's Favor. 2 and a red for enchantment aura. Enchant creature you control. When it enters the battlefield, discover 3. Equip enchanted creature gets +1/+1 as trample. This card's really good. I actually think this might even be a little too low. I love this card. There are concerns. It's an aura. There are always aura concerns with like, hey, what if it gets blown out? Don't cast it into open mana. So that's the reason it's lower, right? Is like you can't always just jam this on 3 because your opponent sometimes has mana up, and basically you can't cast it because if you do, you're going to lose a decent percentage of the time. So don't let that happen to you, because if you let it happen to you, you will be sad. But again, this makes up for the fact that like this card's just so much like if you like high roll on this card, you basically just win the game on the spot because you hit a 3-drop with Discover and it comes into play, and you just also made your thing larger and you have another permanent in play for Descend, and then you can put it. It's really good. It's a really good card. It's really strong. I like it a lot. There is a lot of variability with how good it is, but I mean obviously the upside. The median outcome is like you hit a 2-drop and that's great. So Geological Appraiser. 2 red for a 3/2. When it enters the battlefield, if you cast it, discover 3. Really good card. You know, like you just, again, similar to the last card. You know, you need to do stuff, but this one just does it. This one just does the thing by itself all the time, every time. Double pip is pretty bad. I will note that. Being double pipped, obviously, they have to do it because if you could splash this card, it would be really good. It is not Bloodbraid Elf because it does not have haste. However, you get a little bit of extra upside in that you can, like, if you hit a bad card in limited, it's probably still worse than Bloodbraid Elf in limited because haste is good, but it's pretty close. It's pretty close because like having the ability to just draw the card if you don't want to cast it is actually kind of huge because you know you can't construct your deck to be perfect, so that does sort of help with there. Goblin Tomb Raider, single red mana for a 1/2. As long as you control an artifact, it gets +1/+1 and has haste. This might actually be too low of a grade on this card. I might end up moving it up to tier 2. Because it's a really solid 1-drop. If you play this on 1 and then play an artifact on 2, you have a 2/2 attacking on turn 2. Pretty dang good. There are enough artifacts that are on 2 that this does work with that. I think you're actually just really going to want this card. I think it's just a really strong card. Reminds me a little bit of GBR from Brothers War. I do think it is probably better than GB. I don't know. It's probably worse than GBR because there was just a deck that was just all about GBR. But I think it's still pretty dang good, to be honest with you. I'm gonna keep it real with you though. The art does not look like a goblin to me. It looks like, I don't know, some type of monkey. I think it's a pirate. I don't know. It's very confusing. The art doesn't look like a goblin, so it's a confusing type. So the types are confusing to me. Guildtree Strider, 4 and a red for 3/5 with trample. Tap 2 untapped artifacts or creatures you control. Target creature gets +2/+0 until end of turn. Activate only as a sorcery. No thank you. I have no interest in this card. It's 5 mana for a 3/5 with trample. It's an artifact, which is actually probably bad on a 5. Like, when your 2-drop is an artifact, you're like, oh, I'm thrilled because I get the extra type and it like interacts with stuff. But when your 5-drop's an artifact, it's like, oh, it dies to a braid. It's like, so that there is like that concern where it's like, oh, I played 5 mana for this thing that just gets abraded. So it's like, yes, you can tap it and something else the turn it comes down and give something +2/+0, but you have to do it at sorcery speed. I'm just so off of this card. I really just have no interest in this card. If you could tap at instant speed, I would be so interested. I would be like, this could be something. Because you have to do it pre-combat, I think it's just not very good. Hit the Mother Load. 4 red. Discover 10 for sorcery. Discover 10. If the discovered card's mana value is less than 10, create a number of tapped treasure tokens equal to the difference for some reason. Why are they tapped? I mean, because of, I don't know, commander or something. I don't know. It's like it's bad. Like, it's obviously bad. You're never, like, in limited, you're never discovering for something that is 10 mana. In constructed, this is a fun card. I hope somebody builds a deck around it. And it's cool, but I don't know. I guess, like, you could hit Ulamog with this, right? So you could just play a deck with, well, but the problem is that it's not, like, you can't play spells that, you can't only play spells that are bigger than that. So it doesn't really work that way. Anyways, I'm not a constructed player. It's not very good. Foot Gnome. 2 in red for a 3/1 haste. Another target creature gains haste until end of turn. We've seen this type of card before. It tends to just not be very good. 3 mana 1/3/1 haste just dies to everything. Like how often is this having a good attack on turn 3? Because your opponent's just gonna trade. Your opponent's just gonna be like, yeah, I can just trade their 3-drop. Yeah, I mean 3 mana 3/1, like 3 mana to trade with your opponent's 2-drop is like, it's not the absolute worst thing on planet Earth, but it's pretty bad. And the stats here are not good. So I'm pretty off this thing. It is an artifact creature, for what that's worth. Doesn't really have types though. It is a gnome. Idol of the Deep King. 2 in red for an artifact with flash. When it enters the battlefield, it deals 2 damage to any target, and you can pay 2 in red to craft it with an artifact into this equipment. When it enters the battlefield, attached to target creature you control. Equipped creature gets +2/+0, and you equip for 2. Yeah, I mean this is fine. I don't think it's like super solid, like special or anything, but it's the craft is actually fairly cheap, mana wise, and I think there's not very many things that craft for cheap amounts of mana. And the equipment isn't busted or anything, but it's not bad, and you're getting a free equip out of the deal here, so you are getting something out of it. You're probably going to be using this to craft more, and deal 2 to something isn't like it's pretty bad, but at instant speed it's not so bad, and you are getting like a piece of material out of the deal. So yeah, I think it's okay. Inti, can't pronounce the rest of this card because I don't know how to. Of the Sun, 1 and a red for a 2/2. Whenever you attack, you may discard a card. When you do, put a +1/+1 counter on target attacking creature. It gains trample until end of turn. Whenever you discard 1 or more cards, exile the top card of your library, and you may play that card until your next end step. Yeah, so it's fine. Like, the problem is that you don't really want to do, like, on 3, it's a little bit too risky to do this, because you might just be going down a card, and you have to attack. So the reason I'm keeping this out of tier 1 is A, it's an attack trigger, so you have to attack to get the thing to do what you want, and B, like, you may not want to discard. So there's awkwardness here, but the base stats are fine, and like if you do have stuff you want, and if your deck is like really low curve on turn 3, you just jam it, and it's fine. You can discard lands and stuff in the late game, so there's a lot of nice stuff going on, but nothing super special or anything. Just a solid tier 2 card, I think. Just a good 2-drop. Good 2-drops are tier 2. That's the rules. Magmatic Galleon. 3 red for a 5/5 vehicle. When it enters the battlefield, it deals 5 damage to target creature an opponent controls. I don't know why we can't deal damage to our own creatures anymore. It's truly unfortunate. Whenever 1 or more creatures your opponent's control are dealt excess non-combat damage, create a treasure token, and you can crew 2. It has crew 2. Yeah, basically this is like going to be creating a treasure token 75 to like 80 to 90% of the time when it enters the battlefield, which means it only costs like 4 mana. And like crew 2 is not bad for a 5/5 for 5. Like, I like this crit. Like, this is just really good. Like, it's a removal that makes a vehicle that then just like starts smashing like next turn, and then like really I just think this is really good. Just really good, deal 5, whatever interaction. Love to see it. It's also a boat, so that's pretty huge as well. Oer Ax, nope, another card that I can't pronounce. Deepest Might. 2 red for a 4/4 trample. If a red source you would control would deal an amount of non-combat damage less than this creature's power to an opponent, that source deals damage equal to this creature's power instead. When it dies, transform it into this land. The land taps to add red mana, and you can also pay 2 in a red and transform it back. If all red sources you control dealt 4 or more non-combat damage this turn, it only has a sorcery. Oh, I forgot this was non-combat damage. I read this the first time. I had it lower. I had it in tier 3, and then I was like, oh no, it does combat damage. No, it's non-combat damage. It's tier 3. I put this too high. Yeah, that's actually okay. You know what? We're moving it back. Hold on. The magic of editing. The power of editing has made this card into a tier 3 because I read it again. I'm supposed to have fixed that beforehand, but whatever. Yeah, it's not great. It's a 4 mana 4/4 trample, but a 4 mana 4/4 trample is fine. Like, it's a good card. It's full pipped, and there is upside. Like, there are ways to deal non-combat damage to your opponent. Like, if there's a bunch of stuff that, like, I don't know though. I'm sure there are ways. Okay, surely there are ways to deal non-combat damage to your opponent. There's the 2-drop that isn't very good that can do it. So if you have that combo, it's fine. I'm giving it tier 3, whatever. Actually, you know what? The tier 3 part is that you can transform it back sometimes, even though, again, there's not that many ways to deal non-combat damage. It's fine. Surely this card will not be, like, the worst card ever. I'm probably never going to draft it, though, because people are going to pick it higher than me. Panicked Altisaur. 4 and red for a 4/5 with reach. It can tap it to deal 2 damage to each opponent. Okay, this is a way to deal non-combat damage to your opponents. Okay, are we happy? Are we happy? Okay, great. I don't think I'm going to play this card. I mean, it's fine. Like, this is like a card that if your deck didn't quite get there, you're like, okay, fine, I'll play this. It's a 5-drop. It's like it can threaten to deal damage. It has reach. Like, it's not that bad, but you know, it kind of is that bad, and it just isn't very good. But yeah, it's not bad, but it's 5 mana, so it's not super. It's like 5 mana cards really have to be super exceptional to be like rated higher than like tier 4, because it's just 5 mana. It's just a lot of mana. So it stays in tier 4 for now. Plundering Pirate. 2 and a red for a 3/2 when it enters the battlefield, create a treasure token. Nice. We've seen this as a 3-mana 2/2 before, and those cards were like not great, but you know, a 3/2 is a lot bigger than a 2/2 for 3 because it blocks so much better. It also attacks a lot better. Well, it attacks worse, but it blocks better. Really. Realistically, that's sort of the trade-off you're making, and this is just great. Like, it is also a pirate, so it does, again, types sort of matter a little bit, kind of, somewhat, and this is certainly one of the types that comes up. Yeah, I really just like making artifacts and treasures, and like the 3 mana 2/3 we just saw in the last set was very good. It was not tier 2, it was tier 3, but I think I'm a noted 3/2 enjoyer. I think a 3/2 is a better stat line than a 2/3. There are people that don't agree with me on this. You know, it's a contentious situation. Like the debate between a 3/2 and a 2/3 for 3 mana rages on to this day. But I'm certainly in the 3/2 camp of things. Poetic Ingenuity. 2 and a red for an enchantment. Whenever one or more dinosaurs you control attack, create that many treasure tokens. Whenever you cast an artifact spell, create a 3/1 red dinosaur creature token. This ability triggers only once each turn. So again, there's tons of artifacts in this set. I don't know, like, so this card is a build round, obviously, right? This is a card you have to have your deck constructed with in mind. But I do think that this can get there. You know what I mean? I do think you can actually get there with this. The problem is that you're taking turn 3 off. And yeah, that's bad. If you go like 2-drop dinosaur into this, it's pretty good. Like that's pretty dang good. There just aren't that many 2-drop dinosaurs. So I don't even know if there's any that are common. So I could look that up, but I won't bother. Because it doesn't matter. Whether there are or not, it doesn't really matter. It's just like that's a marginal case scenario, even if there is. I just think that, you know, you make treasures, you make dinosaurs, it enables itself. It's like a cool little build-around-y thing. It might just be garbage, but, you know, it's fun to think about. Rampaging Catops. 4 and a red for a 5/4. It can't be blocked except by 3 or more creatures. Whatever, man. It's 5 mana. I think this is probably worse than the other 5, the common 5-drop that can just ping your opponent for 2, because that thing at least has reach. You know what I mean? Reach, you know. Reach sometimes is very secretive, you know. Sometimes it's a little secret ability, you know. So I don't know. This doesn't seem like I don't. I saw that. Why is this uncommon? I don't know. It's just worse than like Troll of Khazad-dûm from Lord of the Rings. Oh, I've gone too far. Rumbling Rock Slide. 3 in a red for sorcery. It deals damage equal to 2 target creature equal number of lands you control. So this is just fine removal. I was like, oh man, look at how much damage. And then I was like, oh wait, no, it's just sorcery speed removal. Then I got tricked. I almost deceived myself into thinking that this wasn't 4 mana sorcery speed removal, but that is what it is. So that's all it is. This card is much worse than like a cut in, for example. Cut in, like, it looks kind of like, oh, it might be like cut in. Cut in made a young hero roll. Cut in was just cracked. This card is not that card. And as a result, it is worse. Saheeli's Lattice. 1 red for an artifact. When it enters the battlefield, you may discard a card if you do draw 2 cards. Craft with 1 or more dinosaurs for 4 in a red, and you can turn it into this dinosaur that is power is equal to the total power of the exiled cards used to craft it, and it's a star 4. I think this card's really good. We've seen this card like many times, the discard a card, draw 2 cards type card, and it gives you, as long as it gives you a permanent, it tends to be really strong. I think this one will not be an exception. I think you're going to want this. It's going to be very good. It's going to, provides late game value, which is nice, and it also just helps filter your draws, which is also nice. So, very good card. Artifact, all kinds of good stuff. Scytheclaw Raptor. 2 and a red for a 4/3. When a player casts a spell, if it's not their turn, Scytheclaw Raptor deals 4 damage to them. Yep, just basically a 3 mana 4/3, but a 3 mana 4/3 is pretty large. And it prevents your opponents from playing on your turn, which means that your combat tricks get better, and your stuff that's like, well, I need to resolve this, gets a lot better. So it messes up with your opponent. Your opponent basically just has to remove this. They're like, well, gotta remove it. You know what I mean? So this thing's kind of a house. Seismic Monstrosaur. 4 red for 6/5 with trample. You can pay 2 in a red to sacrifice a land and draw a card, and you can mountain cycle for 2. Yeah, I like this card actually quite a bit. Of the land cyclers, it's again the 6 mana land cyclers I think are better than the 7 mana ones, just because you can actually get to 6 mana and cast them. But again, the mountain, paying 2 to cycle, I'm scarred. My brain is just no, I'm scarred from the past of this not being very good. But I think with Descend, it can probably save it, and it probably will be a little bit better than it was in March of the Machine. I think this format might be slower than that format too, just because there's going to be so much stuff where it's I need to mill stuff into my graveyard, and I need to spend time getting cards in my yard so that I can have these descent stuff on, so that makes the games generally more slow, I would think. Could be totally wrong there. That could just be completely wrong. So Sunfire Torch. Single red mana for an equipment. Equipped creature gets +1/+0 and has, whenever this creature attacks, you may sacrifice the torch. When you do, it deals 2 damage to any target and equip for 1. Not my scene. This type of card, I really, the fact that you have to attack is really bad. It's really bad because you're paying 2 mana to deal 2 damage. And yeah, sure, your creature gets +1/+0, but that's not. I wouldn't play Bonesaw, so I wouldn't play this either. And it's an artifact, so that's great, but you kind of want to sacrifice. You don't really want to just play 1 mana artifact that doesn't do anything. I don't know. I'm pretty off this card. Sunshot Militia. 1 and a red for a 1/3. Tap 2 untapped artifacts and/or creatures you control. It deals 1 damage to each opponent activated on these as sorcery. So this is the combo with the mythic guy. You play this guy only if you have the mythic dude. The fact, if you could activate this at instant speed, it would be, actually the most cracked 2-drop ever printed. But it is not, because, I don't know. Sorcery speed is so bad. You can't just be I'm gonna tap out to deal, 2 damage to my opponent. And it's no thanks, actually. I don't, yes, it is when you have, bad blocks, tapping out and dealing some damage. But then, the problem is, why did you have bad blocks? Well, the reason you had bad blocks is your opponent had bigger creatures than you. So that means they're going to be dealing more damage to you than this is getting you back. Yes, you can be well, I have these artifacts that are sitting around not doing anything, and I can tap them to deal 1 damage. Okay, that's kind of something, sort of, but your artifacts you're going to want to use your artifacts. They're not just going to be sitting around for the most part. And this is a 2 mana 1/3, which is generally a pretty bad stat line. So, yeah, I'm not super high on this, unfortunately. I wish it were better because I really like this type of tap your stuff to do stuff type of effect for 0 mana. It's a really cool little type of card interaction. But Yeah, it's just not nearly as good. They learned from Midnight Hunt that those cards were too good, and they stopped or didn't print them again. Tectonic Hazard, 1 mana. For a sorcery, it deals 1 damage to each opponent and each creature they control, not a main deckable card. Triumphant Chomp, single red mana for a sorcery, it deals damage to target creature equal to 2, or the greatest power among dinosaurs you control, whichever is greater. There are some common dinosaurs that go in like every deck, so this will be decent, and in like red, green, it's going to be pretty busted, because sometimes it'll be like 1 mana deal 4, and 1 mana deal 4 is Flame Slash, and that card is great. So, worst case scenario, it's a shock that doesn't go face, which isn't even that bad. It's a sorcery speed. Like again, there's the reason this is not tier 1 is the sorcery. If this were an instant, it would be a tier 1 card. It is a sorcery. So, whatever. Also, it can get blown out. So, be advised. You can get blown out if you're like, I'm going to kill your 4/4, and then they kill your dinosaur, and then it's like, oh, and now the 4/4 just lives. So there is that's the reason it's not an instant. Actually, I would guess if I were part of the design team, I would be like, hey, we don't want players that like to feel bad when they get blown out when they cast this, so we're gonna make it a sorcery, so it's harder for your opponent to blow you out when you cast it. When just because you should have been casting it as a sorcery a lot, and people wouldn't do that. So it is nice to like protect people from themselves in many ways. Trumpeting Carnosaur. 4 red for a 7/6 trample. When it enters the battlefield, discover 5, and you can pay 2 in red and discard it. And it deals 3 damage to target creature or planeswalker. Yeah, this card's busted. I don't have anything else to say about it. If you don't think this card's busted, you may need to reevaluate your card evaluation skills. This card is just super unbelievably good. like you're gonna feel bad discarding it, but like, man, the discard spell isn't even like a bad rate. It's like deal 3 to target creature. You need to kill their thing. Great. It's only 6 mana for like the backside of this. It discovers 5. Again, not that you're gonna have that many 5-drops in your deck, but like Discover 5 and Discover 4 are basically the same. Like they don't really mean that. Like they're not meaningfully different in limited, really. So there is that. But yeah, it's super strong. Volatile Wander. 1 red for a 2/2. When it becomes tapped, you may discard a card if you do draw a card. Solid card. We've seen stuff somewhat like this. It's an artifact. It can do stuff when it crews vehicles. It can allow you to filter your hand. It works with that other 2-drop that you're never going to play. It's fine. Solid card. I don't have any issues with it. Discarding is good in the set. So I'm putting it in tier 3. It could end up being worse than that. The 2/2 is pretty bad, but just being an artifact itself, I think, is somewhat reasonable. Soyawa's Justice. 1 and a red for an instant. The owner of target artifact or creature with mana value 1 or greater shuffles it into their library. Then that player discovers X, where X is its mana value. Yeah, these type of cards are never good. Like, it's like, oh, I removed their 5-drop, and then it's like, oh, but they got another 4-drop. You know what I mean? It's like Tybalt's Trickery. It's not a good card in limited. I promise you don't want to play it. And that's it for red. That's all the red stuff. So I don't have anything else to talk about. Red seems decent. We always expect great things out of it. If you enjoyed the previews from a man that has no idea what he's talking about, appreciate it. Feel free to watch the other ones. They will be similarly enlightening. And see you next time.